the latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long queues heading east through Cheshire on the M56 after two vans collided with a car midway from the M53 and the Chester services. All lanes are back open, but it's still queuing back onto the A494 towards Shotwick, towards the English-Welsh border. And staying in Cheshire on the M6 northbound, the lanes closed 17 to 18 between Sandbadge and Middlewich, where a car's broken down. On the M16 Greater Manchester, there are long anti-clockwise queues from the M56 to Stockport after an earlier crash. That's Stockport Pyramid. On the M1 in Bedfordshire northbound, it's absolutely crawling 10 to 11, partly due to an accident near Luton, but of course not being helped by the ongoing roadworks. And there are long queues on the Hertfordshire stretch of the M25 clockwise 24 to 26 through the roadworks. And in Somerset, southeast of Taunton, the A358 at Hatch Beecham remains closed following a breakdown. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
£30,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours. It's our biggest cash prize of the year so far, and you could be getting that winning call from us to tell you that you're our next Great British Giveaway winner.
You're joking. Really? Seriously? It's not a line, what is it?
I'm slipping neck. Oh dear.
Oh my God. This is amazing.
I'm in shock. Like I said, I've never won anything like this.
That is absolutely fantastic.
We're over the moon. Thank you.
For a chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co.
To the country, I would like to say first and foremost, I am sorry.
The Tories got absolutely battered, didn't they? And let me ask you this, a Labour landslide, which all of us pretty much were expecting, well, they got it with just 30-odd% of the vote. Is our system broken, do you think? And also, let me ask you then about that Tory party. What does the future look like for them? Who do you think should be their next leader? And what's their plan now? What do you think it should be? Also, Reform then, it's got its five-a-side team now. What should the future of that party be? And how was their outcome for you? Do you think they should have had more or not? Your thoughts? All of that and more, but first, the 6 o'clock news.
Michelle, thank you very much. And good evening to you. It's just after 6 o'clock. And as Michelle mentioned there, Reform UK has secured a 5th seat in the general election after a recount in Basildon South and East Thurrock. James McMurdoch, a last-minute candidate, has won with a majority, a narrow one, of 98 votes over Labour's Jack Ferguson. And in a video on social media, Nigel Farage has been seen cheering, saying, "Go on, my son," as he celebrated the news. Well, that unexpected win tonight for Reform comes after Nigel Farage was heckled as he took to the stage in central London earlier. Mr Farage was...
Thank you, mate. Where are you from? Where are you from? Oh, well, that makes sense. Yeah. Are you downwind of a couple already? You've had a bigger lunch than I've had.
Mr Farage was forced to repeatedly delay his speech while security staff removed the protesters. He joked that it was good preparation, though, for his new role in the House of Commons. It's after Reform secured now 5 seats, despite receiving a bigger share of votes than the Liberal Democrats. And speaking at that conference earlier, the Reform leader said the political system needs a makeover.
Don't show us some very interesting things. If we had proportional representation, we'd be looking at nearly 100 seats. But equally, first past the post inverts the other way, where Labour get almost the same number of votes they got, well, in fact, fewer votes they got under Corbyn, and yet 200 more seats. It is very much my view that our outdated first past the post electoral system is not fit for purpose, and we will campaign with anyone and everyone to change this electoral system.
Well, Sir Keir Starmer is wasting no time putting his top team together after becoming the new Prime Minister. He's appointed Angela Rayner as Deputy Prime Minister. David Lammy will be in charge of Foreign Affairs, while Yvette Cooper heads up the Home Office and John Healey becomes the Defence Secretary. Earlier, Rachel Reeves, who's now in charge at the Treasury, gave her first speech to staff there. The new and first ever female Chancellor in the UK said her central mission is to restore economic growth.
To deliver on this mission, I want to be the most pro-growth Treasury in our country's history. That'll mean doing what the Treasury does best, building growth on a rock of economic stability. But it also means taking on new challenges and new responsibilities to fix the foundations and to rebuild Britain.
Rachel Reeves there. Well, before appointing his new cabinet this afternoon, Sir Keir Starmer gave his first speech outside Downing Street, promising to rebuild trust in politics.
This wound, this lack of trust, can only be healed by actions, not words. I know that. But we can make a start today with the simple acknowledgement that public service is a privilege and that your government should treat every single person in this country with respect.
And earlier, the now former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak apologised to the public and revealed he'll be stepping down as the leader of the Conservatives. He said he'd heard voters' anger as he spoke outside Number 10 for a final time.
To the country, I would like to say first and foremost, I am sorry. I have given this job my all, but you have sent a clear signal that the government of the United Kingdom must change, and yours is the only judgment that matters. I have heard your anger, your disappointment, and I take responsibility for this loss. To all the Conservative candidates and campaigners who worked tirelessly but without success, I am sorry that we could not deliver what your efforts deserved. It pains me to think how many good colleagues who contributed so much to their communities and our country will now no longer sit in the House of Commons.
Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis, and I'll be back with you in the next hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thanks very much for that. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight. And what a night last night was, everybody. Goodness gracious me. Alongside me to try and understand, unpack some of it, we've got the director of the Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood, and the former Labour Minister, Bill Rammell. Good evening to both of you.
Good evening.
My overwhelming memory of last night is Elvis Presley. If anyone came to the GB News election watch party, you will know what I am talking about. A fabulous evening was had by all of us there. And I do just want to take a second to say thank you to each and every one of you that came along. It was brilliant. And I'm still singing Viva Las Vegas and lots more in my head tonight. Look, there's lots we need to unpack. Have you followed all the twists and turns today? Many of you will have very strong opinions. Tell me very briefly, where were you last night?
I was at the county in Harlow, my former constituency.
Good night for you?
It was fantastic, although I made the mistake of looking at the Sky News projection for Harlow before I went to the count, and it said we were going to lose. But as soon as I got there, it was fairly clear Labour was going to win.
Well, that's what you get for watching Sky News, then, isn't it? You should have put GB News on. You might have felt better at the start of it.
You didn't have a projection.
Where was you last?
I was in a flat with some of the other popcorn staff and my abiding memory wasn't as good as Viva Las Vegas. It was, if you're going to watch television for that long, you have to reach for the button because otherwise it goes on standby and switches itself off every 2 hours, and we had a full 16-hour marathon.
Did you? I woke up in bed alongside a GB News baseball cap. It was a very fascinating night. I'll leave it at that. Look, get in touch with me. All the usual ways. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email. You can get in touch on our website, gbnews.com/yoursay, or, of course, you can tweet or X me. It's been a massively action-packed day, so let's cross live then, shall we, to our political correspondent, Olivia Utley. You are live in Downing Street. Bring everybody up to speed with what today had to hold.
Well, yeah, I am here in Downing Street with a new Prime Minister behind us, and he has now assembled most of his new cabinet. Last night was absolutely extraordinary, a night to remember in British politics. The Labour Party have won with a majority just shy of what Tony Blair achieved back in 1997. It is a phenomenal victory, particularly as they came from so far back, perhaps even more remarkable than the political earthquake of 97. That said, it must be caveated a little bit in that Labour won with quite a small proportion of the vote share, just 35%. In fact, only 3% more than Jeremy Corbyn lost with back in 2019, which I think explains the speech from Keir Starmer that we heard at about lunchtime today. Some people were expecting radical, bombastic, gleeful, triumphant. That's not actually what we heard. In fact, the best way I would describe it is sort of small C Conservative. He talks about treading more lightly on people's lives, about public service, about the country coming first. He isn't gleeful and triumphant because he knows that even though he has won this huge majority, there is a big mountain to climb. And we have seen a huge Conservative majority be transferred into an even bigger Labour majority. And what Starmer might be beginning to worry about when the dust has settled, maybe in a few months' time, is that that majority could switch back again. Now, a little bit more on the cabinet that he has assembled. There are very few surprises. Most of the shadow cabinet that he has been appointing over the last 3.5 years as Labour leader have indeed been appointed to the roles they were expected to cover. So Wes Streeting is Health Secretary. Now, he's a relatively right-wing Labour MP and is planning big reforms to the NHS, which actually might make some Conservatives rather happy. Yvette Cooper has been made Home Secretary after quite a lot of speculation that he might be turned down, snubbed at the last minute. David Lammy has been made the Foreign Secretary. There were a couple of surprises. Thangam Debonair in Bristol lost her seat to the Greens. She was going to be Culture Secretary, a job which has now gone to Lisa Nandy. The cabinet is now mostly in place. We are expecting the first cabinet meeting tomorrow. Next Tuesday, MPs go back into the House of Commons. It'll be fascinating to see what goes on. What I'm perhaps most excited about is the fireworks we can expect from the 5 new Reform MPs. As you heard in the headlines there, that count of 4 has been increased to 5 after a recount. They are promising to hold Labour's feet to the fire, and with 17% of the vote share behind them, I expect they're going to be quite a formidable force in British politics going forwards.
And have we got the official turnout figure then? Do we know what that was?
The turnout figure was 60%, which is very low. I think it's the lowest in the last sort of 5 or 6 elections. That too is a bit of a problem for Labour. I mean, I don't want to take away from Labour's huge triumph really last night, but 60% turnout suggests that there is big apathy for all the major parties. It's also worth noting that the combined share of the Conservatives of Labour of the vote was only 50%, which is the lowest in modern history. Neither the Conservatives nor, to some extent, Labour were that popular at this election. 60% of the vote share, 60% turnout with only 35% going to Labour means that actually 80% of the country didn't vote for Keir Starmer, didn't vote for Labour to be the next government. Keir Starmer knows that he has to win round those people too and govern for those people as well.
Olivia, thank you very much for that. See, obviously, credit where it's due. I think it's an absolutely fantastic result for the Labour Party, and of course many people your side of the fence, and I'm sure you too, are delighted with that result. But when I sit there and I hear that you've got 400 odd seats on just 30% of the vote, we've got a turnout that was 60%. Do you really feel that that's a strong result?
Look, we have the electoral system that we have, and this is a stunning victory for the Labour Party, and it's partly confidence and endorsement of Labour, but it's also a massive rejection for the Conservative Party. But I acknowledge the turnout was low. Actually, the last time the turnout was this low was 2001. What's 2001 got in combination with today? An expectation of a massive Labour victory, and that does depress the turnout. But, you know, the key to this will be Labour delivering in office, and I think we can do that.
Yeah, I mean, where I'm from, Hull, one of the seats there got elected on a turnout of 41%. I'm talking about Hull East, or East Hull as we would call it, 41%. I mean, I don't know if that's the lowest in the country, but it's certainly one of them. That means like 60% of the electorate there didn't turn out.
Well, you have the right to vote, but not an obligation to vote. I rather agree with Olivia. My reading of it would be there wasn't great enthusiasm for any of the parties. I mean, I should start by also saying congratulations to Bill and the Labour Party. Democracy requires losers' consent. And I think far too often the team that's been beaten finds 1,000,001 reasons why the result was unfair or whatever. The Labour Party have won this fair and square. With that said, their victory is colossal but fragile. 34% of the vote. You know, imagine they don't have a particularly popular time in office, and in 5 years' time, they've lost 5 or 6% of that vote. Then they're in real trouble. It's possible, I think, in today's politics that whilst if you get a bit more popular, you can double your number of seats. If you get a bit less popular, you can halve your number of seats, or in the Conservative Party's case, lost 2/3 of them. I think those sort of swings and results are actually going to be the norm in politics going forward. It's not going to be a stable thing in which we just look at a handful of swing seats. I think most of the country's on the table now.
I want to know what you think about this. Did you stay up and watch it? And if you did as well, which of the seats were your kind of moments that made you go, oh my gosh, look at this, didn't see that coming? Which ones were you particularly happy about? Which ones were you particularly unhappy about? And how do you feel about the conversation that we're just having here in terms of the turnout? How do you get people to engage better or more with this system?
Well, I think part of the problem is, and I would say it wouldn't I, but I think the Tories have trashed politics and government over the last 14 years. The lies, the chaos and division.
Well, if that's the case, then you would have had a massive turnout on behalf of you to get rid of them, but we didn't. We had a low turnout.
But the problem, Michelle, is that what they've done, the lies of Johnson, the chaos of Liz Truss, it infects all parties so that people's reaction is, you're all the same. Now, the challenge for Labour, and that's where I think Keir's speech outside of Downing Street was really important, you know, public service, commitment to delivery.
I'm going to play a bit of that Starmer speech in a second, by the way. I'll just get that queued up, ready to go. But
and delivery in government. Now, if we can do that, then I think we do have a sustainable coalition. What I was struck by, looking at some of the polls yesterday, 22% of Labour's vote were people voting tactically for the Labour Party. So there was a real determination to get the Tories out. But if we start delivering, if we bring economic growth, if we start the major house building programme, I think we can keep that coalition together in a way that the Tory coalition that was assembled by Boris Johnson at the last general election was just unsustainable.
Do you accept that then, that essentially it was the behaviour of your lot so bad that's now disengaged people across the population more broadly?
I think the post-mortem for the Conservative Party is going to take quite a long time, and I fear it's going to be pretty bitter as well. There's a large number of people that figures of blame can be pointed at, and I would think when any party goes through a traumatic result like this, it needs to try and go through the so-called 5 stages of grief pretty rapidly. Otherwise, we are likely to be thrown into a leadership election in which everybody will just scream and shout at each other, and it will just be a question of the blame game. So I hope there's a proper post-mortem. It is very difficult to stay in office after 14 years, right? No party's won 5 elections in a row in our lifetimes. So I think defeat was always on the cards. But it is a very severe defeat that raises a large number of questions. I think the first of those is how the Reform parties managed to take so many votes, which I think otherwise, in, if you like, normal times, would have gone into the Conservative column. That wouldn't have been enough to have beaten the Labour Party, but it would have mitigated the scale of defeat.
In about just shy of 100 seats.
That's right. Yeah,
which is remarkable.
It is remarkable. So it's
party like
I've tipped my hat to Bill and his party. The same to the Reform Party, and the electoral system does not favour them at all. They've had to get. I mean, they've got within spitting distance of the Conservatives and won only 5 seats, and the Conservatives won 121. So there's an awful lot of questions to be asked, I think, about the Conservative Party. Not so much, what it did wrong, but how its structures are wrong. What is its coalition? Who's it trying to appeal to? I think actually Brexit is not so much a cause of realignment in British politics. A realignment was happening, and the Conservatives were trying to appeal a bit to sort of Remainer Liberal Democrat areas in the south and red wall voters in the north. You probably got away with that when you could run on an anti-Jeremy Corbyn ticket, but much, much harder to run that game if you're just running on an anti-Keir Starmer ticket. So vast questions for the Conservative Party. I would say not, in my view, existential questions. For all that's been said, the Conservatives have come a clear second, are absolutely unambiguously the official opposition, and the ball starts in the court of whoever the next leader of the Conservative Party is to try and knock it into shape again. And if they do, voters will come back. That's the nature of politics.
There's an element of that I agree with, that, if you looked at where we were at a week, 10 days ago in the polls, an awful lot of people were thinking that Reform was going to come second and the Tories third.
And the Lib Dems could be the official opposition.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but
and
then
the Tories outpolled Reform.
A lot changed since then, didn't it? I think that, let's be honest, there was a campaign against Reform that was absolutely staggering. Really, I felt.
No, Reform at last came under some scrutiny. And the longer the campaign went on, the clearer it was that Nigel Farage doesn't like answering questions and doesn't like being asked to justify his stance. And I think he was exposed in that sense.
But when you say they came under scrutiny, which I don't doubt, by the way, they should, as should every party that's making promises and wants to represent us, so I have nothing against scrutiny. But are you seriously telling me that the amount of scrutiny that Reform was subjected to was the same equally as all parties? So, for example, you've got the likes of a Channel 4 doing undercover investigations. Do you think they did that into any other party other than Reform?
The Labour Party has faced massive scrutiny during this campaign. And, from the Tory party, we've faced a barrage of lies about what we intended to do once we were in government. The bit that's changed...
Well, that's from your political opponents, isn't it? And that is politicking.
Well, Reform are our political opponents, right? Whether you're a Conservative or Labour, they're fair game.
No,
but the media have scrutinised all the parties, and I think it's clear Reform and Nigel Farage don't like it.
You honestly don't think that there was a campaign that was, for me, it felt like it was coming from all sides to try to attack and undermine Reform, whether it was the amount of time spent going through God only knows what historically, trying to dig up debt on candidates. I don't feel there was that much effort put into the rest of candidates on the slate. For example, we had... it feels so good now to be able to say candidates' names or the constituencies without feeling edgy that I'm about to spend 10 minutes reading out lists of people's names. Is so liberating. But, for example, you had the situation in your party where you had Jovan in Clacton, who described his favourite drink as being white man's tears. He said he was standing for black and brown people. And if the opposite, if Nigel Farage says my favourite drink is a pint of black man's tears, or I'm standing for the white man, he'd have been out that door quicker than a quick thing from Quickland. But it was glossed over.
Well, it wasn't. I remember discussing those comments on, I think it's on your show or on somebody's else. So it certainly was scrutinised. And Labour candidates...
He stayed in position.
Well,
It might have been discussed briefly.
He didn't fight an effective campaign.
He stayed in opposition and he was on the ballot as the Labour candidate.
Yeah.
If that was Nigel Farage that said, my favourite drink is black man's tears, he would not have been anywhere near standing.
But Michelle, you're not complaining about scrutiny. You're suggesting that different parties are held to different standards, which is a rather different thing. Scrutiny should be applied across the board. And you've just proven it was applied to the Labour candidate in Clacton, because we discovered his Twitter history.
I'm saying I have no issue with scrutiny. What I'm saying is I feel that there was an unfair campaign that focused desperately in on trying to undermine reform, where other parties didn't have that same level of, I would say to some element, conspiracy surrounding them.
I don't think it was a conspiracy. I mean, I think, look, the issue about the Reform Party, which I think made it interesting and a cause of legitimate inquiry, was, as Nigel Farage and Richard Tice confessed, it was a complete start-up party. So we didn't really know anything about their 600 candidates. So you had to go and find out. We knew a lot more about the Conservatives and Labour.
Don't tell me, oh yeah, we were so interested in this new start-up that we had nothing better to do than inform ourselves about them. I think there was a little bit more to it.
But there were so many more Reform candidates who bluntly were far-right extremists, you know, supporting the British National Party, appeasing Hitler, someone saying that we should have, you know, done a deal with Hitler in the Second World War. These are views that are way out of kilter with where the British public are.
And I think a lot of those stupid opinions were very swiftly dealt with, wasn't there? There was people removed from the party very quickly. What do you think to it all at home? There's a lot I want to talk to you about after the break. Do you think it's time, essentially, to reform the political system in this country? Many people do. Let's look at that. And, of course, our brand new cabinet. What do you make to it? And, last but not least, the Tory party. What is the future for them? And who should lead them? You tell me.
Britain's Newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
So the royal family is opening the doors of Balmoral Castle to the public and giving guided tours today for the first time in more than 170 years.
And one man who spent plenty of time there is former royal butler Grant Harold, who joins us now. Grant, we know the Queen loved Balmoral, and that's, of course, where she was in her final days. Why was it so special?
I think for many reasons, but most importantly, it was a family home, and it's where she spent a lot of time with her family. I mean, we all know the Queen, obviously monarchy was the first thing, but she always said that family was right behind that. And so time with family was important, whether it be at Sandringham or Balmoral, which were both properties that she privately owned. So they're private homes and very special.
Which kind of makes it even more surprising that King Charles has decided to open the doors to the public.
I was surprised when it was announced, because for many years, I've always said that Balmoral's one of the most private homes. You know, they've always been quite fierce about keeping a private home, private estate. You can visit the gardens at certain times of the year. You can see the ballroom as well. But to actually go in the rooms is really a big step for them. And I think it just shows you that the kind of future of the monarchy with properties is opening the doors and letting the public in to see them.
Yeah. Now, you had a very special occasion in that ballroom, because you saw a film in there, but I'm actually interested by who you danced with in that ballroom.
In the film that I watched, the documentary, it was the Queen dancing, and I remember thinking I would love to dance with the Queen. And about 12 years later, I was in that ballroom and got to dance with her in that room. So
that's fabulous. Was she in her full tartan regalia?
She was in a beautiful dress. She had a blue dress on, which similar to what she wore in the documentary that I saw. And they actually replicated the scene in The Crown. Right. I was very disappointed to see that Brad Pitt wasn't playing my sadly.
How unfair.
GB News, the People's Channel. Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's Newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's News Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock. The director of the Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood, and the former Labour Minister, Bill Rammell, alongside me. Look, let's listen to a clip from Nigel Farage, because there's a lot of conversation today about reforming the electoral system, and it's all to do with the amount of vote share that people got versus the amount of seats. So, for example, the Labour Party got 412 seats on about 34% of the votes. Lib Dems, they got 71 seats and their share was 12%. Reform got 5 seats with a higher share, 14%. Let's listen to what Nigel Farage had to say on that.
Don't show us some very interesting things. If we had proportional representation, we'd be looking at nearly 100 seats. But equally, first past the post inverts the other way, where Labour get almost the same number of votes they got, well, in fact, fewer votes they got under Corbyn, and yet 200 more seats. It is very much my view that our outdated first-past-the-post electoral system is not fit for purpose, and we will campaign with anyone and everyone to change this electoral system.
What do you think to that, Mark?
He's got a point, and I'm unusual as a Conservative who actually is very open-minded to some form of electoral reform. The Conservative Party as a whole hasn't got much to complain about in these results. They've consistently supported the first-past-the-post system, and if you live by it, you should die by it as well. But let me try and muster a case for the present system. It doesn't produce a completely fair result, it really doesn't. But it does produce, typically, it produces decisive results. And there is something to be said for that, that generally speaking, the biggest party, if it's sufficiently ahead of whoever's second, forms a government. And the people can be seen to have decided overnight. If you have a pure proportional system, you know what? Whether you go up 5% or down 5% doesn't make that much difference. And a government is always cobbled together in smokeless rooms, I should say, in today's world, between 4 or 5 political parties, and you get a mishmash. So I like the kind of clarity and the decisiveness of first past the post, but I worry that it is now, in a multi-party system, out of kilter, and I'd like to find some way of amending it such that at least the smaller parties who get a good chunk of the vote aren't necessarily propelled into government, but at least get something approaching a fairer chunk of the seats.
What do you think, Bill?
I'm a supporter of proportional representation, so in that sense I agree with Nigel Farage. But I think his critique of the Lib Dem performance is unjustified. One, the Lib Dems geographically concentrate their vote, and that is effective. Two, a big element of their vote was tactical.
Yeah, right.
So it actually represents much more than 13%. You know, I know friends of mine are lifelong members of the Labour Party who happily voted Lib Dem last week, so it's more significant. But one of the major reasons that I'm in favour of PR, one, yes, it's clearly unfair if a party gets 15-20% of the vote and virtually no MPs, but it will stop what we've experienced for the last 14 years with the right wing of the Tory party dominating the government's agenda in government. Now, if we had PR, I'm not one of these people who thinks that that means the Tories would never govern. They would, but they'd be forced to the centre ground in order to win.
And do you think, actually, we just talked before the break about turnout and things. Many people, because I've said this loads of times, I typically don't vote in general elections. I did this time, and I have the previous two because I was running in them. So I completely understand why people don't go out and vote. And this first past the post system, when you're saying, yes, it gives decisive results, it does also, the flip side of that is it makes you feel there's no point going out because in my seat, Labour will always win or Lib Dems will always win or whatever your seat is. And it stops that turnout.
Yeah, the truth of it, I mean, I hate to say this, in any individual case, Michelle, whether you vote or not doesn't make the damnedest bit of difference unless a candidate wins or loses by 1 vote and you'd voted for that candidate. So I don't believe that a proportional system would suddenly, everybody would think their vote counted. It doesn't especially matter if a given individual goes, yeah, your one vote would not have affected the election.
Well, not just,
so it's more a question of civic duty.
But there'll be millions of people like me.
And the other argument that used to be made for electoral reform, which again I'm sympathetic to, was that there's vast numbers of safe seats across the country, and therefore the only votes that count are those in the 100 or so seats that are contested between the major parties. Well, the last two elections have proven that to be wrong. It seems that there is no such thing as a safe seat anymore. We've seen, you know, safe Labour seats fall while they win a landslide majority. The Conservatives have gone from a comfortable majority to losing 2/3 of them. So I actually think your vote does count, and also your engagement in the local political community counts. Not just a question of voting. If you actively support one candidate or another in your area, you can now make a meaningful difference.
Brian, on the website, he just got in touch and said, essentially, Michelle, 40% of the people didn't vote. They sat at home and they couldn't be bothered. So therefore, he says, Labour have won, so you reap what you sow. I don't actually think, Brian, it's a case of people couldn't be bothered. I know there will be some people like that, I don't doubt it. But I really don't think that's why a lot of people don't vote, just that they burn idle, quite frankly. I think it is a little bit more complicated than that. Diane says she does absolutely think the political system is unfair and needs change. Lots of people are actually saying exactly that same thing, that it's proportional representation that they want. Do you reckon it'll go to a referendum and that we'll be given a choice or not?
Well, unlikely, even though I probably welcome that. The problem is that the people who win under the system don't really have an incentive to change it. So although Bill's been very honest about his pro-PR tendencies, generally, if you benefit from the first-past-the-post system and win a colossal majority, discussions about reforming the system are put to one side. So it's quite difficult to actually get that done.
So there's no prospect of it happening
anytime soon
in this Parliament. But the reality is every electoral system has its flaws, its downsides and its drawbacks. The question moving forward is whether our multi-party system, which we do have now, is so fractured that it's not sustainable under first-past-the-post.
Yep.
And I think there's a compelling argument that it's not.
That's fair.
Someone on my website says, please can you talk about sectarian politics? I mean, we know what they're referring to there. We're referring to the people, the pro-Gaza activists, essentially, that got elected into Parliament. What do you think to that, Mark?
Yeah, this really caught me somewhat by surprise, actually, and it seems to have caught the Labour Party a bit by surprise. Two of their shadow cabinet, well, one of them down, John Ashworth, lost surprisingly. Wes Streeting nearly lost his seat. Didn't think anybody saw that coming. This is a problem for all mainstream political parties to combat this. I don't have an easy way of doing it, other than that all reasonable political parties need to be wholly united against it and prefer any one of the mainstream parties to win to any one of the sectarian parties to win. On the upside, George Galloway lost his seat, and I consider him to be a sectarian politician as well.
Best result of the night, in many senses, because he's a disgusting man who deliberately divides communities.
Well, a lot of people obviously like him, hence he won his seat there in the by-election, I guess.
Much lower turnout, and he was able to, it was overturned.
And Labour messed up in that by-election big time, yeah.
We had a flawed candidate that we then immediately disowned.
But a lot of people are very angry, aren't they, about what's going on in Gaza. They see the images of predominantly children, let's face it, getting maimed, killed. It's awful, it's horrendous. And a lot of people, that is the issue that is closest to their hearts. They feel more passionately about that than perhaps they do whatever it is that's going on the ground here.
And absolutely. And that sentiment has been weaponised by far left and extreme Muslim extremists who've weaponised the Gaza issue. Now, I think it was right that we had support for the State of Israel when they were horrifically attacked. It's also right that we call for an urgent ceasefire, but crucially that we politically move towards a two-state solution to resolve the conflict.
Did you see what happened with Jess Phillips?
Yeah, awful.
When she was basically announced as the winner, essentially, there was so much, I would call it aggression, basically, towards her. I thought it was really awful, actually, and I think she really held her own very, very well. And at one point, she even said to these people, ultimately, you don't like a strong woman standing up to you. And I think she was absolutely right.
I totally agree with her, and I think one of the really sad things in politics today is there's an awful lot of inadequate men who, for some reason, find it acceptable and necessary to challenge women in public life in atrociously crude terms.
Yeah, I actually think it's more deeper than that, actually. I think that there are some people that have Islamist tendencies that actually don't think that women are equal to them. They would look at women as less than. And I find that quite a problem.
I think there's an element of that, but if you look at the abuse that women politicians and women in the media face almost on a weekly basis, it comes from across our communities and across the political.
It would be nice in our democratic politics if we could have a convention that people should be as noble in victory as they are gracious in defeat.
There was a lady at the election party, the watch party last night, actually, and when that Jonathan Ashworth result was broken, basically, she said, she was a Jewish lady, and she said it made her feel really quite anxious because, of course, he lost to that pro-Palestinian independence. She said, as someone that was Jewish, that rising sentiment was really quite distressing to her. What do you make to all of that, and how, actually, do we combat this? Your thoughts on all of that? I'll see you in 2.
Hello, very good evening to you. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast coming to you from the Met Office. This weekend's looking relatively cool and showery for many of us, but before then we do have some heavy persistent rain around. Today we've had a waving front across southern parts bringing some wet weather here, and then a pulse of heavy persistent rain is pushing its way northeastwards across England as we go through this evening and overnight, clearing through though as we go through the early hours of tomorrow morning. That being said, there will be some heavy persistent rain lingering across northern parts of Scotland, which could cause some localised issues. Elsewhere, some showery rain, but also some clear skies, under which, away from the towns and cities, we're likely to dip into single figures. So a bit of a fresh start for the time of year. If we look in more detail, and as I mentioned, there will be some heavy persistent rain across some northern parts of Scotland. We could see some high totals building up, chance of a bit of flooding and some difficult driving conditions here. Heading further south though, and there will be some showers perhaps across parts of Northern Ireland and into northern England too. Watch out for some heavy showery rain affecting more central parts of England and into Wales too, and then across more southern parts of England we're likely to have just a mixture of sunny spells and a few scattered showers around. As we go through the day, some of the heavier, more frequent showery rain should clear away of sorts, but there will be plenty of showers around as we go through the afternoon, particularly towards the north and west. Further south and east, perhaps a greater chance of seeing something a little bit drier, but even here, 1 or 2 showers are possible. There will be some blustery winds around, and with temperatures below average for the time of year, it is going to feel relatively cool for most of us. Overnight, the showers should largely die out, so Sunday is actually likely to start mostly dry for many places, but quite quickly we're going to see a rash of showers developing, many of us likely to catch some showers, and they could be heavy, possibly even thundery at times too, and temperatures still on the low side for the time of year. Monday at the moment looks largely dry before more wet weather arrives later on. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long delays on 2 stretches of the M1 tonight. First of all, heading north through West Yorkshire. The entry slip road is closed to junction 45, along with 1 lane on the main carriageway near Leeds. A car's broken down in the roadworks. Much further down, it's crawling heading north through Bedfordshire, 10 to 11 near Luton after an earlier collision. Again, the roadworks on that stretch not helping. And on the western stretch of the M25, anti-clockwise, 2 lanes are closed, 17 to 16, just north of the M40 at the scene of an accident, and slow clockwise through Hertfordshire, 24 to 26 through the roadworks. In Essex at Harlow, Southern Way is closed following a 2-car collision. In Wiltshire, south-west of Rawwood and Bastard at Tockenham Wick, the Hillocks is blocked for accident investigation work, and there are no stagecoach buses in and around Liverpool today because of the strike action. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Mark Littlewood and Bill Rammell remain alongside me. We didn't actually touch on Jeremy Corbyn. What was your response to that outcome?
Disappointed. I think, Corbyn was a stain on the Labour Party, a stain on British politics, and I'm delighted he's been expelled from the Labour Party. But it's interesting. I was talking to some people who canvassed there, and they said that people were saying, yeah, we're voting Labour. We're voting for Jeremy Corbyn because he'd been around for so long. He was the face historically, of the Labour Party. So he's back. I don't think he will have enormous influence as one independent MP.
Do you not? So what do you think about that? Shall we take a second to run through the new cabinet then? Have you seen it? Are you impressed with it? I don't actually think there were many surprises.
None. I mean, the only surprises
really...
are
the two gaps he had to fill because the shadow cabinet members lost their seats.
Yeah, I don't really think so.
But I think that's a virtue. I mean, I think Keir is determined, unlike previous leaders, he's not going to constantly chop and change with his top team. He wants them to work seriously, develop their portfolios, and you are going to see some continuity.
Yeah, because literally, you will know all of these. I mean, I'm not teaching you anything new because it's exactly as discussed before. You've got Angela Rayner, of course, she's the deputy. You've got, she also is Secretary of State now for Levelling Up Housing. Communities, Rachel Reeves. Chancellor, Pat McFadden. Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Yvette Cooper, Home Secretary, Lamy, Foreign, Commonwealth Development, Wes Streeting, Health. I mean, it's just... It feels a little bit boring because we already know it.
But David Lamb, I think the public can do with boring after what we've experienced.
Is that what we need? A little bit of... Because it has been actually pretty... I mean, I look at you, your side of the fence. It's been awful.
Yeah, I mean, I actually said to Bill before we came on air I could do with a good few months, possibly a few years of boring. I mean, I can't remember when the last boring political year was. Probably got to go back to 2005 or something.
And one of the statements in Keir's speech outside Downing Street that really resonated was, we're going to tread more carefully on your lives. I don't think people want the constant mayhem and chaos.
And the interesting thing, having touched in the earlier side of the programme about Labour perhaps not coming to power on a wave of public enthusiasm and ecstasy, we'll see. Maybe public expectations in what Labour can deliver are actually quite low. The nightmare for the Labour government would be if expectations were now colossal and in a few weeks' time people were saying, well, why hasn't it happened yet? We'll see. That's just a guess on my part. But actually...
Under-promise and over-deliver was actually one of the virtues of Labour in '97, and I think that's got the opportunity to happen now.
One of the viewers at home is asking about the amount of experience in the field that people need to have to be appointed to some of these roles. How important is it, if at all, in your view, that if you're going to be involved, I don't know, Secretary for Housing or for Defence or whatever, that you've had experience in that field? Does that matter?
No, I don't think it does. And actually, if you come to a brief without experience, it means you come to a brief without prejudice of what works and what doesn't work. But I tell you what, this cabinet is much more experienced than the cabinet that came in for Labour in 1997. You know, people like Yvette Cooper, David Lammy, John Healey, all served with me in the last Labour government. So they do bring knowledge and experience of how Whitehall works and how you move it in a positive direction.
And what about the role of women? I've heard a lot being said today about, for example, we've got our first female chancellor and all the rest of it. Is that something you focus on?
Well, obviously, as you can see, I'm not a woman, so it's never... It's never much bothered me, given that I think we've broken through that barrier. So it just didn't cross my mind that Rachel Reeves was the first woman chancellor. I mean, oh, really? OK. I mean, we've had 3 women prime ministers, you know. Does that really make history, you know? I mean, for all I know, well, Lisa Nandy isn't the first woman culture secretary, but you know what I mean? We put that tag on it quite a lot. I would hope that we've got to an age in which people are judged on their talents and the Prime Minister appoints the best chancellor he's got, male, female, tall, short, fat, thin. And I wish we wouldn't go on about it so much.
No, I actually think it's been a big battle to get women's representation to where it is. We're now at 40%, close to half, and I think that's a positive development.
So you had all-female shortlist, didn't you, for a while? And were they still a thing in this election or not? Have they gone back?
No, we've still got women-only shortlists. I almost lost out to women-only shortlists. So I'd fought the Harlow constituency in 1992. There was a strong chance Harlow was going to be a female-only shortlist in 1997, and because 50% of the seats had to be. Eventually, it wasn't, and I succeeded. So at a personal interest level, it's kind of like I can understand concerns about it, but without women-only shortlists, you would have never broken the glass ceiling.
I think women-only shortlists are a bit ridiculous. Because as long as you've got within the selection panels that are making the decisions, if you've got mixed, for me, it's not just about your gender, it's about what's your experience, what do you bring to the table and all the rest of it. So as long as you've got a mixture of people making the decisions, you should have the best people for the job presented as potential candidates. I would never, ever want to get a job, literally, just because no guy was allowed to apply. I would be absolutely mortified. And every day I went to work, I would sit there thinking, I am a token member of this team and I'm here because a guy wasn't allowed to compete against me. And actually, as a strong, capable, successful woman, I feel I can compete against men. I don't need you to remove men to make me as a female successful. I think it's a bit pitiful.
But Michelle, the reality in both the Tory party and the Labour Party, you talk about, you know, balanced selectorates. They weren't. They were predominantly men and, you know, faced with good, capable, impressive women, they repeatedly chose not to select them.
Well,
and I think that...
But the issue, I think, for all political parties here, I'd like to feel it's almost problem solved now, that you're referring to something back in the 90s. We need diversity across all fronts. What's your educational background? You know, what's your international knowledge? Not just gender.
Certainly. Look, do you know what? There's a very special part of the week, and that's Dewberry Tavern. It opens after the break, and I'll tell you what we're discussing over a beer. What's the future for the Tory party? Who should be its next leader? Your thoughts?
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
How deep is the rift between Prince William and Prince Harry? Well, it's been reported that Prince William is refusing to speak to Prince Harry and has even taken on the role of disciplinarian, which was once, of course, the job of Prince Philip. But has that job gone now to William?
After the death of his mother, I know that Prince William had to think again. And then we see him with the Emperor and Empress of Japan. And William thought again, do I want to do this job? Because there's nothing in our uncodified, unwritten constitution that says anybody has to be heir to the throne. And he thought about it. He was only 15 at the time. And he decided he did, and he's done his duty, in great contrast to Prince Harry. Now, I don't think there's any chance at all of there being a reconciliation with the brothers now or in the foreseeable future. It goes back to Oprah Winfrey interview, then the book Spare, and all the things that were said in the Netflix 6-part series. Too much bad blood, and William is not going to forgive that. Principally because he, of course, and his wife attacked personally his wife, Kate. And even when the announcement of her cancer was made, their mealy-mouthed response to it didn't show any great concern to her.
Okay.
Because William looks at them and he would say what most people would say. All of this is completely unnecessary. It is unnecessary. Prince Harry has had a wonderful, privileged life. He owes everything to being a member of the royal family. People who are struggling, people who are battling, would wonder why he's so upset.
The People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Dewbs and Kerr till 7, alongside with the Director of Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood, and the former Labour Minister, Bill Rammell Remain. Look, it's Friday, so you know the drill. Dewberry Tavern is open. Cheers to all of you guys. Cheers to both of you, and especially cheers to you, the Labour Party, on your victory.
Thank you.
Ultimately, whatever we might think and politically disagree, the success of the Labour Party will be the success, ultimately, of the country. So I shall drink to that. And cheers.
Cheers.
I would raise a glass to Keir Starmer, but it's Friday and it's after 6, so it won't be working. So I won't waste my time with that. Let's talk about the future of the Labour Party. The Tory Party then. Lots and lots of people are getting in touch asking, what does the future look like?
Yeah, well, it's uncertain. As I said, I think there needs to be a calm period of reflection. I fear it will be factional. I don't know who I want to be the next leader of the Conservative Party, but I know the traits I'm looking for, which is an explanation not actually just at what went wrong in this general election, but why have we made such poor progress over 14 years in government? From a Conservative perspective, Bill will be delighted that we made poor progress, but 14 years of Tory government, taxes at their highest level in our lifetimes, regulation at its highest level ever, big deficits, disappointing growth. And I think that, you know, there have been some successes. There have been. I think some of the education reforms have worked well. Whatever you think of Brexit, I think getting that over the line was a challenge and was done well. But in so many areas, if you'd just taken a snapshot of Britain in 2010 and a snapshot today, you would not have assumed there had been 14 years of Conservative government. So they need to answer that question. I think they need to answer a question about engagement within the party as well. The party's become very undemocratic. The chairman of the party was on a shortlist of 1. You were arguing about all women shortlists. This was an all chairman of the party shortlist, right? You had to be the chairman of the party, North Korean, and he nearly lost the very safe Conservative seat on the back of it. So there needs to be a lot of change in the party as well. And you need to work out what you're going to do with Reform and Nigel Farage. I want someone who can answer those 3 questions.
Bill?
I think the first thing you need to do is to show some humility and contrition. And I found it staggering after the exit poll came out last night. The first thing the Tory party did was put out a statement saying saying Labour's going to put up your taxes and be soft on defence and security. They need to think and listen as to why they've lost so heavily and really reflect upon that in order to be able to move forward. In terms of, you know, what kind of candidate who, I actually think Penny Mordaunt probably would have been their best bet. She's now lost her seat.
So out of the bunch you've got then, who would you be backing?
I really genuinely haven't decided yet. I mean, I will decide and I'll make it public. I'll happily say on your show when I have decided. I do want someone who can win back voters from Reform. I don't think this has been an especially right-wing government, actually. I think it's been quite a leftish government.
Welcome, Nigel.
I think that I don't rule that out. I don't rule that out. But it's not about Nigel Farage. It's about the 4 million people who voted Reform, a good chunk of whom would normally vote Conservative. The Conservative Party does not own those votes, but a question needs to be asked about how one might win them back. If Bill's party had lost a vast number of votes to another centre-left party, Labour would be asking, how do we win those people back? It's not about Farage, it's about the 4 million votes.
But do you know what? You can't out-Farage Farage.
Sure.
And I think it would be really dangerous for the Conservative Party to welcome Nigel Farage into the party. You can't win from that position in British politics where you do have to be, or at least present yourself as being in the centre ground, and you can't do that with the Farage agenda.
So you can't out-Farage. There you go. Kazi says, Michelle, what about Suella? She says that Suella was very humble yesterday and feels that she was definitely making a leadership bid. There you go. Who would you back? And what do you think the Tory party should look like? That can be your homework. We'll pick it up on Monday. That's all for now. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend. Tom Howard up next. Nights.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good evening to you. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast coming to you from the Met Office. This weekend's looking relatively cool and showery for many of us, but before then we do have some heavy persistent rain around. Today we've had a waving front across southern parts bringing some wet weather here, and then a pulse of heavy persistent rain is pushing its way northeastwards across England as we go through this evening and overnight, clearing through though as we go through the early hours of tomorrow morning. That being said, there will be some heavy persistent rain lingering across northern parts of Scotland, which could cause some localised issues. Elsewhere, some showery rain, but also some clear skies, under which, away from the towns and cities, we're likely to dip into single figures. So a bit of a fresh start for the time of year. If we look in more detail, and as I mentioned, there will be some heavy persistent rain across some northern parts of Scotland. We could see some high totals building up, chance of a bit of flooding and some difficult driving conditions here. Heading further south though, and there will be some showers perhaps across parts of Northern Ireland and into northern England too. Watch out for some heavy showery rain affecting more central parts of England and into Wales too, and then across more southern parts of England we're likely to have just a mixture of sunny spells and a few scattered showers around. As we go through the day, some of the heavier, more frequent showery rain should clear away of sorts, but there will be plenty of showers around as we go through the afternoon, particularly towards the north and west. Further south and east, perhaps a greater chance of seeing something a little bit drier, but even here, 1 or 2 showers are possible. There will be some blustery winds around, and with temperatures below average for the time of year, it is going to feel relatively cool for most of us. Overnight, the showers should largely die out, so Sunday is actually likely to start mostly dry for many places, but quite quickly we're going to see a rash of showers developing, many of us likely to catch some showers, and they could be heavy, possibly even thundery at times too, and temperatures still on the low side for the time of year. Monday at the moment looks largely dry before more wet weather arrives later on. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems in County Durham. The A689 remains shut between the Rushford roundabout and Lettingthorne. Investigation works taking place following an accident. Midridge Road is also closed. On the M1 in South Yorkshire, and the northbound Exeter lane is closed. Junction 37, the Barnsley exit, where a car's broken down. Long delays on the M11 southbound through Essex. 9 to 8 if you're heading towards Stansted towards the A120. One lane's blocked by an accident. And in Essex, at Harlow, Southern Way remains shut following a 2-car collision. Long queues on the Hertfordshire stretch of the M25 clockwise through the roadworks from 24 to 26, and on the western stretch 2 lanes are shut anti-clockwise just north of the M40 following an accident. And in Wiltshire, southwest of Rawwood and Bassett, the Hillocks is blocked through Tockenham Wick at the scene of a crash. That's the latest. I'm Johnny Ratner.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
It's our summer treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Our